Well, a little earlier, we had independent economic analyst Edward Kusewa here in studio with us. We asked him how beneficial the WTO's multilateral trade approach is to countries in Africa.
African trade ministers have actually denounced that there's a lack of transparency at the WTO meetings. They have also denounced the fact that the agendas that are normally discussed are not democratic, and they touch on issues that do not have an vital importance on priorities as far as African trade is concerned. And basically what has dominated talks in the WTO for quite a long time is international terrorism as against and as opposed to agriculture and health. So three things that are coming out. One is that we need a discussion around subsidies in agriculture. Secondly, has been a lack of discussions and negotiations around market entry and trade barriers to African commodities, and especially to routes like the UK and Washington and Europe. So we have those barriers, market entry barriers, that hinder African commodities selling in those developed countries. So if we can address those two issues, then Africa is going to be well off in negotiations. But there's also another very strong point, and especially the point that also a lot of African trade ministers don't understand trade pacts. They don't understand those trade agreements. So there's a lack of capacity as far as African trade ministers are, and the technicalities around those agreements. So we need to open up the space and get a lot of capacity in African so that these ministers are able to interpret and understand some of those documents. For African countries, one of the areas that they need to cushion is to be able to trade with one another, to trade themselves, especially when it comes to exports. There has been a lot of exports, especially exports around steel and aluminium from Congo and other countries, South Africa. But now with the trade wars and the trade barriers that are being imposed by the United States government, then there's going to be a fallout of these exports to the developed countries. Now, how do the African countries cushion themselves? The best way for them to be able to cushion themselves is to be able to have regional pacts and regional integration movements so that they are able to trade with one another, develop their small and medium enterprise sector so that the economies can grow in the event that these trade wars pick up. Apart from the primary exports of aluminium and steel, our small and medium enterprises are not very much affected by the trade war between China and the US, primarily because of the fact that we don't have a huge manufacturing base, that definitely we don't manufacture automobiles. We don't have, but obviously there's going to be a slowdown as far as exports that come from DRC, that is steel exports and aluminium from South Africa.